Hi, I'm Yuna, and if there are two things that I spend more time in my day thinking about than anything else, it's acting and A Song of Ice and Fire. If I combine those things, my biggest dream would look like playing Rhaenys the Conqueror in the Aegon's Conquest movie. I have very big feelings about that dream and very few industry connections, so I figured that I might as well use what I have at my disposal to get my name out there. And what I have at my disposal is sewing, pattern making, and a long history with rhinestones because of my background of figure skating. I've been acting for over a decade, and I've had Meisner movement and voice training from Rutgers. So if you'll allow a girl to get scrappy, I've put all those things together into what is essentially a Targaryen-inspired art time lapse with a whole lot of talk from me about Rhaenys, A Song of Ice and Fire, and my love of acting. A video resume with lots of dragons and sparkles, if you will. Before we jump in, for any interested parties, my website is linked below, which has samples of my acting, so you know that I'm not just a fan with a Targaryen hyperfixation. No one is more dedicated to playing Rhaenys the Conqueror than I am, but that's a story for another time, so stay tuned to hear the dramatic tale of being scammed, endless Google searches, and spending money that I do not have. Now, without further ado, I present you with the making of the Dracarys dress. I've actually been trying to make this dress for 2 years, but my initial strategy was beading, and that made me want to tear my hair out. So after taking some time away from the dress, I returned armed with rhinestones and E6000 glue. I've been sewing for 5 years and learned technical pattern making and sewing skills in an undergraduate fashion design and production program. I learned how to rhinestone from my friend while we were rhinestoning our own skating dresses for the team we were on. The concept behind this dress was basically the dragon being the bodice and it's breathing fire up my neck, which is the collar. Getting into a bit of technical sewing talk here, I used a basic bodice sloper and combined it with the dragon shape that I wanted, which led to there being 2 darts on the dragon wings to adapt to the shape of my body. Darts are added to sewing patterns to create fullness or eliminate gaping. The process of sewing the dress was first to sew the darts on the outer dragon and the lining. I then sewed the outer and lining collars and skirts to their respective dragons. I also put the straps on the outer dragon. Finally, I sewed the shell dress and the lining dress together and turned the dress inside out to hide the raw edges and seams. After this, I top stitched all around the edge of the dragon to make it nice and flat, as well as to make sure that the lining wouldn't peek over the edges. To talk a bit more about myself, I'm not only an actress, figure skater, and designer. I like to call myself something of a Renaissance woman. I have a lot of different interests, and I feel like I've lived so many lives. I love to sing, and I have an A2 to C7 vocal range. I have an associate's degree in music production. I write songs, I dance ballet, tap, jazz, and commercial, and I choreograph. I also used to get paid to climb and jump out of trees, so I'm down for stunt work too. I will be posting here and on my website every week different videos of my different passions, so I will be walking the walk, not just talking the talk. My hope is ultimately to get representation and be a working actress, and my dream of all dreams is to play Rhaenys in the Aegon's Conquest movie. This will not be the last video you see for my campaign for Rhaenys, so as I said, stay tuned for the next one. So now we get to the rhinestone part, which means lots of sparkles. I used 3 different colors of Preciosa rhinestones, which are Austrian crystals and made my wallet weep for months. I used Siam, Light Siam, and Jet. For the Siam, I used sizes 30, 20, and 16. Light Siam was 20 and 16, and Jet was only size 16. Don't ask me what any of those numbers mean precisely because I don't know. All I know is I had small, medium, and large stones relatively. Originally, I was going to draw an outline of the dragon on the fabric to guide where I put the stones, but I'm awful at drawing, so I ended up eyeballing things and counting the stones I was placing to make it even on each side. I started rhinestoning with the head, as that seemed like a good and easy place to figure everything out. I used Siam 20 and maybe also some 16s for the dragon's base color, because House Targaryen, obviously, and then used Jet 16s for the horns and that ridge of spikes that the dragons have down their back. Drogon's morphology was the guide I was using for this dragon, and we all know how Dany was hanging onto those spikes for dear life because she had no one who knew how to build a saddle for a dragon. You'll also see that the tail gets done off screen at some point. I couldn't film every single moment of me rhinestoning because I was filming with my phone and I was using the 4K settings, so my phone would frequently run out of space and I'd have to transfer the videos to my computer, which would take a while. The wings are the part that took the longest, and I don't have much more interesting to say about the rhinestoning itself, so I want to nerd out a little bit, and first I'm going to nerd out about Rhaenys the Conqueror. I absolutely adore Rhaenys. If you'll allow a girl to get a little Wendy Williams, Rhaenys is an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment. Now come on now. I've wanted to play Rhaenys since I was a teenager. To me, she's just the coolest Targaryen. I relate to her in so many ways. First, she was on her dragon all the time. You know where I would be if I had a dragon? On my dragon. All the time. The fact that she's spending more time on Meraxes than Aegon and Visenya on their dragons combined? That's my girl. I think it's really cool also that she's described as no true warrior. I think it shows a lot of her character and her courage and her love of her family, because even though she's not interested in fighting and war, she still fought for Aegon's cause and supported her siblings in their campaign. Rhaenys would rather just be flying around on Meraxes having a good time, but she was there for her siblings when it counted. I think she's such a badass in a really cool way because she's kind and playful and kind of soft-hearted, but she's also so capable and able to take command. I love her and Visenya because they really show that a woman can be strong and a warrior and a leader without forsaking or degrading the fact that she's a woman. Like, Rhaenys loves all these soft and artsy things like music and dance and poetry, and she's graceful and kind, and at the same time, she's running the kingdom with her sister while Aegon's brooding in his room with Orys Baratheon. And Visenya, even as a fierce warrior, is described as just as comfortable in silks as she is in armor. I just love how these characters honor their femininity and womanhood rather than talking down on it. They prove that power comes from who somebody is and not their gender. And can we talk about my girl being ahead of her time? The rule of 6, outlawing the Iron Board, stealing women, like she said, not on my watch. Not on my watch. And she cares deeply and especially for the small folk. She's just so cool. And like all George R.R. Martin characters, she has her moral greatness as well. I mean, family loyalty or no, Miss Girl said sure to conquering a continent and burning people on her dragon. I think that makes her so much more interesting and complex that she can overall be this person who's described as kind-hearted, but has enough darkness in her that she can do these violent things. She's just such an interesting character, and I love her so much, and I would take such good care of her if I got the opportunity to play her, and I would do everything I can to honor everything about her. Okay, now I want to nerd out about another part of the Westerosi universe. If you're a fan of A Song of Ice and Fire in the television universe, you know that A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms came out earlier this year, and House of the Dragon Season 3 is airing right now. I, of course, love all the dragons of House Targaryen, and seeing a different era of Targaryens in Akotsk, as I like to call A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, was so fun. I've been thinking though, what if King Daemon II and his sons and their children had dragons? I've thought a lot about who would have what dragon from the dance era based on the personalities of the known riders and the dragons' personalities. I'm only going to do the Targaryens we saw in the show because we have more experience with who they are as people. If you're not interested in this nerd out session, too bad. I have no one else to talk about this with in depth, so you're stuck with me. So I think King Daemon would ride Silverwing. I know we didn't see him in the show, but we do know a lot about him, and he's one of my top 5 Targaryens, so I wanted to include him. He's a peaceful guy, not really a fighter, and neither is Silverwing. Also, Silverwing came from the crib egg of Queen Alysanne Targaryen, aka Good Queen Alysanne. And what is King Daemon II called? Daemon the Good. I rest my case. Baelor would ride Vermithor. Vermithor, of course, came from the crib egg of King Jaehaerys I, also called Jaehaerys the Wise and Jaehaerys the Conciliator. Jaehaerys is described as wise beyond his years, as chivalrous as he was courageous, learned as a maester, and pious as a septon. He always sought the most peaceable ends. Now, if that doesn't sound like Baelor Breakspear. Dunk says Sir Arlen called Baelor the soul of chivalry, and Baelor was his father's hand, so he's very wise. I see the learned as a maester in how Baelor knew just about everything in the show, from Sir Arlen's history to the Trial of Seven. And pious as a septon reminds me of when he tells Aegon, Aerion is your brother, and the septons say we must love our brothers. I feel like Baelor is just like Jaehaerys in that he's a peaceful man who's also a formidable warrior when he has to be. Maekar would ride Vhagar. Maekar and Vhagar are two grumpy peas in a pod. Vhagar's got her grandma energy, and Maekar is a single dad of 6. They need each other to validate their grumpiness and commiserate together. Also, Maekar is a fierce warrior and a stern man, much like Vhagar's first rider, Queen Visenya. Valar would ride Targaryen. I was torn between Seasmoke, Meleys, and Targaryen for Valar, but ultimately chose Targaryen. I think Meleys riders are a bit brasher and wilder than Valar comes across as, and what really swayed me towards Targaryen was Valar being remembered as bold, brave, and full of promise. I feel like this also aptly describes Targaryen's first rider, Daeron the Daring. Daeron was courteous, clever, and described as the gentlest of his brothers. We didn't see a ton of Valar in Akotsk, but I feel like he's similar to Daeron, obviously courteous and gentle after being raised by Baelor. I think Targaryen has both the boldness that these two princes have, but there is a gentleness to her that suits Daeron and Valar as well. Daeron the Drunken would ride Sunfire. Honestly, my only reasoning for this is that Aegon the Usurper was a drunk and so is Daeron. In any case, our good boy Sunfire deserves to just fly around and look pretty. We know Daeron, I'll fall on my face in the mud Targaryen, won't be flying Sunfire into battle. Aerion would ride Caraxes. Aerion is crazy. Daemon was kind of crazy too. I feel like Caraxes just needs that unhinged energy from his rider. Aegon the Unlikely would ride Dreamfire. He's a sweet boy, so I feel like he'd have a sweet dragon. He's also described as bold and quick with a retort, but also kindly and approachable. And Maester Aemon says Egg had innocence and sweetness. Aegon's also described as compassionate towards animals, so I feel like he'd be a Rhaenys the Conqueror, Rhaenyra, Helaena, Laena Velaryon type who just loves to ride. Since Meraxes is gone and Vhagar is claimed, that leaves Syrax and Dreamfire. I would choose Dreamfire for Aegon because her first rider, Rhaena, traveled around Westeros a lot and stayed in many different places just like Aegon did. Rhaena also had that boldness and sort of impetuousness that Aegon is described as having. Finally, we come to the collar, the Dragonfire, the Dracarys of it all. For this, it was almost all size 20 stones with the exception of a few size 16 sunstones that my friend lent me to fill in some small gaps. The colors I used are Sun for the orange, Topaz for the orangish yellow, and Light Topaz for the yellow. I didn't want it all to be just orange because fire can have so many different colors in it, and all the art and scenes from the show that I saw had a mix of orange with lighter orange and yellows as well.